Hello there everyone, this is Lava Planks here. Today we're making a tutorial about the Embarcadero Delphi. I'm going to show you the basics of how this program works, but also some more advanced features like making an actual program. Alright, so here in this UI, you wanna go here up at File, click that, New, and we're gonna stick with VCL applications because they're the most fast in classic Windows, but this multi-app device applications also run on Android and macOS and iPhone if you want to work with that. It's pretty different, but the basics are basically the same. Alright. Here we have a new application. It currently has nothing on it. So, for example, I want to add a button and a label. Now, this label is not big enough, so here in the object inspector, you're going to see a bunch of properties. These are for the label. For example, caption is what the label is going to show. Font obviously shows font settings. So let's expand this. And here, look, size 12, 14, all like that. So I want you to say hello world. Very simple. And here we're going to say run. You can also select more components at once like that. It's sometimes helpful. So first off, I'm going to create a panel. In this, you can place other components. For example, I'm going to place another button, and now it's inside the panel. Very helpful. I'm going to now look at some of the properties that most components have. For example, alignment. This one is where you want the panel to be. None, you make it sit wherever you want. But with these, you can basically stick it to a side. For example, I can make it here, so it's always up there. I can set it to left, so now when I resize the program, it always stays there. Pretty helpful. Or I can just revert it back here. So let me resize this real quick. Like that. Next up, alignment. This one usually refers to the text inside the panel. For example, I wanted left, center, right, justify. If you notice, this component automatically resizes by the text size, like that. Well, if I want to disable that, I can do that. And you see the text is always in the left side. I can change alignment to center, and now it's in the center. Or I can do this to right, and it's right there. Next up, color. This is something basically all components have. It's just the color of the component. For example, like that, blue. Button face is the default one. Now, if I change this, you see nothing actually changes. That's because it's set to be transparent, so basically nothing behind is visible. Like I can place this and you can still see the button. And if I disable transparency, you see the color actually applies. These settings are basically when you want to drag the component and how you want to handle that. It's not really that useful in most programs, but it can help. These border and bevel settings are just for the panel. For example, I want a big border or make it just like that. I can completely disable it. I can add it like that, or can I make a space? And I can also make a flat border, which looks pretty nice. I can make the border, but it doesn't actually change it. Yeah. Next up, cursor. Actually, let's run the program right now. And I'm going to create a new project, a new folder for each program. I'm going to name it tutorial project. Oh yeah, the unit name basically is for this form, which is basically the window you're seeing here. And I can name it test unit. And this, the dproj, is the project file. So I'm going to name it tutorial, like that. And now it's compiling, and bam, there's our window. Very simple. You can always run the program from here or run without actually debugging, which can help sometimes. So now let's see the cursor property. Let's say I want it to look like it's loading. So now when I hover my cursor on this, it changes to the loading one. If you click on nothing or just select the form, this one also has a lot of properties. We're going to go over those real quick. Next up, we have height. This one is also for most components. Pretty easy to understand, just the height of the component. These help context keyword. Context is basically for the Windows help page API. Like for example, this thing, this window, which is basically from 95, 98, which most programs use to show help topics. So you can add something like that. I never use that though, because I don't really need that. The name of the component is how it appears here in the structure of components. So for example, I can name it name123 and it appears right here. But the first letter character must be a letter. It cannot be a number. For example, if I say 123 name, it doesn't work. It really needs to be like that. Text. Next up, parent properties. This is basically what this component inherits from its parent. So for example, here we can see this button has its parent to be the panel. So for example, if I say font, let's make the font bold, all components in the panel will have that. But if I disable the parent font, and let's say I want the Segoa UI, like that, and I don't want it to be bold, I want it italic. Now when I change this, let's say I want all of these, it doesn't change the button, only the text inside the panel. I can also disable that by changing show caption. Also, this search box here allows you to search properties. It's very helpful because sometimes these menus get pretty cluttered. Next up, height, left. This is basically where the component is placed, like 100 there, 300. Margins, this is for alignment. For example, if I say align it there and enable align with margins, now here, let's say I want the right margin to be 100. Now there is a space here of 100. I don't really want that, so I'll disable the alignment. I guess. Next up, this is padding. It's pretty similar to the margins, but I didn't really work with it that much. It can be helpful again for certain cases. Next up, we have a touch manager. This is for gestures and things like that. These will work better in multi device applications, because there you have a gesture manager which can detect everything very well. It's kind of half-baked in VCL, but it can work. Vertical alignment, this is again for text. For example, this text is sitting at the top. So if I change the vertical alignment, where is it? Or, I don't know, layout. Yeah, layout is for this. So vertical alignment. Yeah, it's the same thing, but has a different name. Next up, we have the visible property. Now, this is very important because it's the most used property when you want to work with components. For example, now I can see everything here. I can see the panel and the components within it. I disable visible, and like that, it's no longer there. It's disappeared. Also, if you see, all components have their own name. The main window is named the form1, but I can change it to app form 1, 2, 3, anything really. So let's say I'll leave it to form1, the default one. Now, for example, you want when you click a component something to happen. To do this, you double click on any component or go to the events properties and double click on the on click property. But you can just double click on the component and it will automatically click the on click property. So I double click on this and I have this code view of the program. I can toggle this by pressing F12 like that. Or I can just go down here and switch between them. Now, this may look confusing at first, and you may not understand exactly what's going on here, but I'll explain it as well as I can. First, this is the unit name, which is basically what contains all the code for the form. Next up, interface. This basically contains, tells the compiler what this unit has. And implementation is basically where you write your code. Now, type here is where you define classes. tform1 is a class of a form. And here you can see all components that are on the form. You can see the button, the second button, the panel, and the label. They're all here. And also here you can see procedure. And this is basically the code which gets called when you double click the button. See button one click. So here I can reference any of these names and tell them anything about it. For example, text is the name of this label. I can even change it. Let's say label 1, 2, 3. I'll just copy that. So in this section of code between the begin and end, I can put the label 1, 2, 3. And then if I want to access one of the labels settings, like the ones over here, I can just add a dot, and here we can see a menu, and it auto completes as you type. So I want to say the caption, which is basically the name, the text that appears on the label. I say caption, and in Pascal, which basically is the language Delphi uses, you cannot say equals because that's for C++. You have to add a double dot and then an equal, and then here between two of these basically is a apostrophe, and here you can put the code. And like in C++, after the section of code, you need to add a column. So now, in this, I want to say, like, I want you to say hey there, test application, and like that. Also, very important, these characters you cannot add in the text because it will basically mess up how the text is detected. So you have to be careful with how that works. So let's say I'm running the program, and now this button, when I click on it, it changes. Very nice. So now, if I select this button and go to events, you can see the on-click event now says on button 1.click. But what if I go like to another component and then see on mouse enter, which is basically when the mouse hovers on the component? I can also reuse this procedure because it's compatible with this one. So now, if I hover over the surface of this, it also works. And also, you can still see the cursor I placed there. These are basically the basics of this, but every component can be accessed like that. And you can change basically everything however you want. Now, let's check out the form because this is basically the main window. It also has a line feature, and I guess it works. You can set the alignment and it will be on the side. I personally don't really use this because it's not that helpful unless you want like a full screen app. But we're going to look at some of the more interesting features. For example, alpha blend and alpha blend value. When I enable alpha blend or I don't, nothing changes. But if we change the alpha blend value like to 150, because before it was 255, you can see now the entire window is translucent and you can see through it. This could be called a arrow effect, but it's not really handled exactly by the Arrow desktop window manager, but it looks nice for some programs. Well, let's disable that. Also, anchors. This is another property that all components have. For example, this one has anchor left and top. This because it's anchored to the top and left part of the form. When I resize this, it sits exactly where I placed it. But, for example, if I want it to be anchored right instead of left, now, basically, it's not going to be anchored this side, it's going to be anchored this side, and you will follow that. So when I resize the form, it always keeps its distance from the right side of the form. And I can do the same thing with the bottom property and disable the top one. And like that, it works. Also, another one, very important one, is hint. This, in order for it to work, you need to enable show hint and then say something like hello world 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0. This basically pretty explains itself, but it's a hint. See, it shows there. Alright, going back to the form. This one also has auto scroll, auto size. Auto scroll is basically if you want scroll bars for the form. For example, now you can see you cannot see the entirety of the panel, so the form added scroll bars, so you can go like that, so you can see it. It doesn't look that nice, so I'd rather not use this property, but again, it can be used by some programs if needed. Border icons. this is for these icons. For example, if I disable system menu, the icon and these icons disappear. If I disable maximize, the maximize button is basically now unclickable. See, it cannot be pressed. If I disable minimize, both of them will disappear and it will look nicer. And you can only press X. And if you have these disabled and enable help, that icon will appear. But you need to add some special handling for it to work. And if you disable the minimize icon like that, you will see this one is active, this one not. Pretty simple. Border style. This is very important. If you notice, the window can be resized. It has a proper border. But if you change this property, for example, none, now there's no X button. You cannot close it. I can stop the application by pressing this red button or by clicking Alt F4 if that works as well. Single, this is basically as the sizable one, but you cannot resize it. It's staying at the same size constantly. And a size tool window. This is basically one of those tool windows you see in other programs like that. The square X button. Like for example in paint.net, if I open this up, you'll see I have these windows with the X. And then where to go? Tool window is basically like this one, but you cannot resize it. Caption is basically what's appearing here. I can say hello world, or I can say amazing test application, like that. This is basically the same as the height and width, but only for the inner part of the form. It's ignoring the title bar. Next up, constraints. This is to disallow the form for being completely resized to oblivion. So you can see I can resize this like that, and it's a disaster. It looks terrible. This is the case for other programs. I think Write is one of them. Let me check this out. Yeah, I can resize it to oblivion and it looks terrible. I don't think MS Paint has this problem, but let's see. No, it cannot be completely resized. So if you say min height osuta, minimum width osuta, and I run the program now, I can resize this and it cannot go lower than 100. It's the minimum. But again, 100 is still a pretty low value, so I'm going to say 400. 400. Also, if you noticed, I'm not pressing the run button every time. That's because you can press F9 for the program to run. And again, you see, it cannot be resized. It's sitting at this size constantly. And max width, max height is basically the same thing, but for the maximum value you can use. Cursor, again, like this. Custom title bar, this is a more advanced component in which I'll not be getting in this video, but it's for you to be able to change the color, the X button, add even more buttons like however you wish, and things like that. Next up, we have drag height, which is again standard property. Font, for example, I want 12 inherits. Glass frame, this is for Windows 7 when they had the arrow effect. Help file, help keyword, and help type. This is for the help button I mentioned before. You need to add some special files for it to work. This is for the scroll bar that appears when you enable it. Icon. This is a more important one. For example, I'm going to go in my assets folder by me, and I'm going to go to icons. Let's say I want this check mark. I press OK, and bam, you can see it right there. And now if the program runs, check mark, check mark. Incredible, right? Next up, key preview. This is for when you detect a key getting pressed. It usually just gives you a code, but which is basically corresponds to the key code of that key in keyboard input. But with key preview, you can also detect the arrow keys. These are usually disabled because they're used for navigation. Old create order, I don't know what that is. A name, I mentioned this before. This is basically for DPI scaling. Let's try 10. No, it doesn't work. Maybe it's a read-only property. Pop-up menu, this is for pop-up menus. Position, this one, when the program runs, you can see it appearing in this position constantly. So let's change that. I want design. This one, basically, I give it the left and right value, and it will pop up there. Like, see, left, top values, not right. Also, my favorite option here is screen center, because if I run this, it's always going to show in the middle of the screen. It looks pretty nice. Print scale for scaling, I think DPI scaling. Screen snap, I don't know what exactly that's for. Tip mode, some tips. And this is important. Let's say I have this label and I don't want it transparent. I want it to be red. And you can see it's pure red. If I open up a Windows color picker, it's F000 and 255 red. Let's say I want a transparent color. I'm enabling that. And here I say red. If I run the program now, you can see there's a hole in the window. You can see through it. This isn't extremely helpful, but when you want to make a nice user interface and add some nice looking elements, this can definitely help. And next up, vertical scroll bar. Visible, this is basically if you want to hide the form. Now, if I enable in the Windows state like maximized, when the form starts, it's going to be maximized by default. And that's basically what that is. There are even more properties for each component, which are not shown here, and these can only be accessed through code like that. Now, I'm sure some of you may be thinking, this program doesn't look that modern. It looks old, like the old user interface of Windows 7, something like that. Like, I don't know what it is. Like the run dialog. It's old. It doesn't look modern. But you can still make Delphi programs look nice by creating your own components and using the custom title bar I mentioned before. For example, Delphi Help. This is a coding database that I made for myself in Delphi. And here I keep all my information for how I want to program. So you can see this looks very modern. It has buttons, search. I can search for hello. Let's say transparency. Desktop window manager forms. Yeah, with that, I can also change this. I have a menu there. Now, if I go to documents, here are all the documents I made in Delphi Help. Tools, these are just some tools I made. For example, color picker. Again, it's Delphi. Very useful. You can also see this program follows my accent color. Yeah, if I go to personalization colors, let's say I want this accent color. If I am to reopen the program, you can see it has turquoise as the accent color. Very nice. And this is again for everything. I can click copy, copy to clipboard. This is just made in Delphi using my own custom components. I think it looks pretty nice. Yeah, time converter. File folder calculator. Let's say open, I don't know. Let's say music or downloads. Let's go to the D drive. Viruses, let's see. 91 megabytes. Or maybe I want to check out how big the not this one. Windows, let's say this one. Now, it's calculating. This may take a while because the Windows folder is very big. So I'm going to go to the Smart Text Replace. This one is very helpful. So let's say, for example, you have a label one. You have 10 labels and you want each one of them to be set to this text. Well, if you do that like that, you'll have to go manually change 2, 3, 4. This is very time consuming and it's not good. It's waste of time, completely useless. So this can work as just a simple replacing app or like that, 2, 1. But it also has a smart replace feature, like incremental replace. Let's say I want to start from 5, 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is basically an issue because it sets to 10 and it tries to replace itself again with. But yeah, this program is extremely helpful for things like that. Wait, look at that, 28.2 gigabytes. Let's check this out. Windows. This may take a while because my program is faster than Windows. About. This is basically the About screen. Settings. Custom title bar. This is what it looks without it. Not nice. This is what it looks with it. I also have a light theme for people who use that. And all of this is made in Delphi. I'm going to show you some of my components as an example, but there are many free components you can download by just going to Tools and get it package manager. For example, let's check out some more popular components. See, look at that. Circle buffer, styles. There are many components here that can be helpful. My favorite one is Aerosoft VCL components. It has quite a lot of useful features. Now, for example, let's see some standard components. Slider, button, another button, but flat, progress bar, star rating, image. Let's say I want all these icons are made by me in paint.net, so they're very helpful. Pie chart, color diagram, color box, panel, and one of my favorites, it's a minimize panel. And all of these made in Delphi. I think they're pretty cool for, oh, another one, checkbox. And again, this button also follows accent color. I can use a picture. Let's say I want a clock. Alignment, let's say top, and bam. No. Oh, I deleted the label. Save. Like that. So Delphi is quite a lot more powerful than people think, because you can make very nice things in it. Some of the same things you can make with the UWP platform, but this is more stable because it doesn't rely on web apps and the Windows Desktop Manager. And again, you can select components, delete them. You can make quite a lot in Delphi. Another example I could show you is CAS-based database manager. This is one of my bigger projects I made in Delphi, just so I can show how powerful Delphi really is. So let's check this out. Here it is, the CAS-based database manager. So I have this grid full of items, like, let's check this out. Hello world. I can undo, redo. I can print. I have even more advanced printing. I can toggle these settings. I can redraw the program. I can search. I can set data. I can change colors of cells like that, or that, or even that. Font, alignment, borders. It's quite advanced, basically like Excel. You can also have equations like eq 10/5 plus 5 minus 2, calculate plus sinus of 1. Very simple. And I can also toggle that. I have statistics, sorting, line jumping, preferences, storage data, file association, colors, security, I haven't implemented that. Layout manager, this is another settings pane basically. I can add encryption or disable it, change license. Oh, this needs information. Backups, help page. Quite a lot. I think it's one of my favorite projects. Quite a lot. It's a very cool project. But this just shows the power of Delphi. In the next episode, I'm going to show you how to make a simple application with control list, a selection of components, and all of things like that. Thank you for watching this video, and we're going to see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye now.